Chapter 512 The 3 Ultimate Haodong Skills. What kind of soul skill is that it can do this? Of course, Hua Yuao wouldn't answer that. However, when his soul ring lit up, Tang Wutong was momentarily taken aback as she held his hand, and she subconsciously turned around to stare at him. A complicated look flashed through her eyes. There were some disconnected memories in her mind, besides those that belonged to Wang Dongda, her childhood, and what happened afterwards. Those pieces belonged to Wang Qia. Currently, Hua Yuao was using the soul skills that Wang Qia had bestowed upon him, spiritual dispossession and destiny's demise. A black and white beam of light suddenly struck out across the sky, instantly striking Yan Xiaosh, who'd been hit with the hexagon array. Hua Yuao and Tang Wutong were the only ones who could see this black and white beam. The only thing the people spectating their battle could see was his eye of destiny, which had turned black and white, flashing faintly, and the air around them contorting slightly. Yan Xiaosh felt chills run down his spine, while goosebumps broke out all over his body as a cold that chilled him to the bone coursed through his body. He was a transcendent Douluo, and his senses were extremely sensitive. Such a sinister change gave him a rude shock. What kind of power was that? It didn't contain any offensive effects, but why does it make me feel so alarmed? Tang Wutong used her next soul skill immediately after Hua Yuao was finished. Her second soul ring flickered, after which all the golden spots on her wings unleashed spheres of golden lights that blasted towards Yan Xiaosh. Yan Xiaosh was surrounded by intense golden flames at this moment, and stepped out of her hexagon array. It was extremely difficult for Tang Wutong to hurt him with her soul skills considering the difference in their strength. Yan Xiaosh waved his right hand through the air, and a strange layer of golden light blanketed the sky. Tang Wutong's light of the butterfly goddess disappeared into nothingness. However, the sense of danger that had given him goosebumps before was still present. What was that? Exactly. Strong doubt surfaced in his mind, but he didn't dare to hold back due to the sense of danger he felt. He took another step back and punched out towards Hua Yuao. It appeared that he was just simply throwing a punch through the air, but the entire sparring arena changed intensely as this punch charged forwards. At least, that was what Hua Yuao could sense. Hua Yuao felt as if the space surrounding the punch had collapsed. Formidable restrictive forces pressed down on him from all directions, and squeezed him so hard that he almost couldn't breathe. This was clearly just a punch through the air, but he felt like the fist had appeared in front of him in an instant, and it was akin to an enormous, majestic mountain hurtling towards him in an unstoppable manner. This wasn't a soul skill. Rather, it was Yan Xiaosh's self-invented skill, a perfectly fused and formidable soul skill where he combined all the energies and forces within his body. Hua Yuao almost subconsciously wanted to use his 3 ultimate Haodong skills. Of his self-invented soul skills, he rarely used the goddess of light, as it wasn't as formidable as his 3 ultimate Haodong skills. Furthermore, using the goddess of light after Dongda vanished would immediately trigger his yearning for her. However, the moment he attempted to focus and unleash his 3 ultimate Haodong skills, his entire being froze a little. A long time had passed since he'd invented his 3 ultimate Haodong skills, thus he was extremely familiar with how they were used. He could perfectly fuse his emotions, soul power, and spiritual power to attain powerful effects. Theoretically, his 3 ultimate Haodong skills should become even stronger with Haodong power supporting him. However, when he attempted to unleash them, he realized with a sense of shock that he couldn't use them anymore. This was a matter of ability. He simply couldn't reach the emotional state required anymore. The 3 ultimate Haodong skills were the fist of remembrance, which contained a feeling of resurgence, the sword of longing, which would never be forgotten, and finally, the Haodong palm, which would last for eternity. Every strike was based on and completed through his intense thoughts and yearning for Dongda. Hua Yuao had to first channel intense longing for Dongda when he used his 3 ultimate Haodong skills before he could unleash them naturally. But at this moment, Tang Wutong, who was also Wang Dongda, was right next to him, with his lover right beside him. How could there be any longing? Just as he considered back then, his 3 ultimate Haodong skills had become ineffective now that he'd found Dongda again. Reality had proved his hypothesis, and he found that he could no longer use his 3 ultimate Haodong skills. That moment of hesitation was enough for Yan Xiaosh's attack to arrive in front of him. Tang Wutong and Hua Yuao had fused their soul power, thus the two of them were acting as one. As such, Tang Wutong was the first to realize that something was wrong with Hua Yuao. She basically didn't hesitate to take a step forwards and block for him. She raised her right hand over her head, and her 8th soul ring flashed. Her entire body began to glow alongside the light of her blood red soul ring. She began to radiate a brilliant gold that carried circle after circle of bluish hues. She was like a small sun, with countless blue butterflies waltzing around her. Intense bluish gold colors transformed into an enormous pillar of light that met Yan Xiaosh's fist. When they met, an intense explosion occurred, making the entire sparring arena tremble. The various elders who were maintaining the protective dome had to inject more power into it in order to ensure that they blocked all of the explosive soul power undulations inside. Yan Xiaosh emerged from the explosion, while Tang Wutong stumbled backwards and fell into Hua Yuao's embrace. The absolute gap in their strength had caused all the color to drain from her pretty face. Even though she hadn't been heavily injured, the soul power in her body had been riled up, and ripples from their Haodong power meant she and Hua Yuao could feel their blood surging. Meanwhile, a look of surprise had appeared in Yan Xiaosh's eyes. Tang Wutong's attack hadn't been that simple. Even though he gained the upper hand, Yan Xiaosh could still feel his soul power trembling after clashing with her. He had to expend quite a bit of spiritual power to get his soul power back under control. That concussive power. Yan Xiaosh was the dean of Shrek Academy's martial soul department, and had spent his entire life investigating different kinds of soul skills. He could immediately tell what was so frightening about the soul skill that Tang Wutong had just used. If it wasn't for his absolute advantage in terms of cultivation, and the fact that Tang Wutong didn't seem very familiar with this soul skill, the outcome could have been quite different. Yan Xiaosh was a rank 97 transcendent Douluo, while Hua Yuao and Tang Wutong could only barely reach rank 90 with their Haodong power. However, because their martial souls were very powerful, and because there were 2 of them, their rank 90 was more formidable than typical titled Douluo. But in the end, the gap between them was just too large. There was an insurmountable gap between a titled Douluo and a transcendent Douluo. If both parties had the same level of soul power, or if Tang Wutong had gained the upper hand, then the soul skill that she had just used would have been extremely terrifying with its full strength unleashed. It had a high temperature, it contained the element of light, and it was very powerful. These 3 different elements were then combined, their degree of fusion comparable to that of a self-invented soul skill. Yan Xiaosh seemed like he defended against the attack easily. However, the truth was, while he was very powerful, he was also adept with the element of light. His radiant phoenix possessed light and heat as 2 of its most salient characteristics. Thus he had a natural resistance when defending against Tang Wutong's attack. But what if someone else had been her opponent? The situation would probably have had an entirely different outcome. She fell gently, but Hua Yuao felt an intense heartache. Tang Wutong had forcibly taken this hit for him because of his error, so how could he not be upset with himself for his mistake? Hua Yuao subconsciously wrapped his arms around Tang Wutong's slim waist, his 3 eyes simultaneously bursting with light. His will to fight had truly been ignited. Hua Yuao took a deep breath before grabbing Tang Wutong with one hand and slowly raised his other. His 7 soul rings suddenly became 8, and an intense blizzard rapidly descended upon the sparring arena. The temperature of the arena fell to an extremely low degree almost instantaneously, and Hua Yuao and Tang Wutong disappeared within the blizzard. The Snow Empress 3 ultimate techniques: the Empress Sword, the Empress Palm, and the Empress Chill. This was a fusion of the Empress Chill and his domain of perpetual ice into his snowy dance of ultimate ice. After absorbing the manifold mysterious ice essence, the temperatures that Hua Yuao's ultimate ice could reach were much more terrifying than before. Su Tong's martial soul was an icy snow lady, and was also a martial soul with ultimate ice, but she was still a far cry from Hua Yuao in terms of how cold she could make her ultimate ice. It was why she'd immediately admitted defeat after seeing Hua Yuao freeze the entire surface of the sea god's lake. A temperature more than 200 degrees below zero permeated the entire sparring arena almost instantly, and even Yan Xiaosh shivered. Despite his cultivation, the advantage that ultimate martial souls held became increasingly obvious as their cultivation increased. Yan Xiaosh's martial was the radiant phoenix, and was adept with both light and fire. At the very least, Hua Yuao's ultimate ice could counter his element of fire. No matter how profound or wild his radiant phoenix martial was, the flames that his martial soul granted him contained the fire of light, not ultimate fire. As such, he didn't have an advantage against Hua Yuao's ultimate ice. Yan Xiaosh grew serious for the first time. He could feel that Hua Yuao was fully concentrated at this point. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be afraid of Hua Yuao, who was still a child in his eyes. However, that feeling of danger from before still hadn't disappeared and seemed to be plaguing him. This made him a little more careful, as the unknown was the most frightening. Blazing phoenix flames erupted out from Yan Xiaosh. What he wanted to do was very simple. In Shrek Academy's lessons about Soul Master battles, there was a class about advantage. The first thing that Soul Masters had to do when battling each other was unleash their respective strengths and advantages as much as possible to suppress their opponent. What was Yan Xiaosh's greatest advantage against Hua Yuao and Tang Wutong? His soul power. There was an insurmountable gap in their ranks of soul power. Therefore, even though he knew that his element was disadvantageous, he still chose to use his overwhelming strength without hesitation. As a rank 97 transcendent Douluo, he relied on the strength of his soul power to instantly expand his radiant phoenix's flames. The sparring arena was only so big. As a transcendent Douluo, he was entirely capable of covering it completely in his phoenix flames. When that happened, Hua Yuan would naturally no longer be able to keep his domain up, and thus would be forced into the open. Furthermore, Yan Xiaosh would be launching an all-round attack against him in the process. But something astonished Yan Xiaosh as he attempted to do so. As his phoenix flames fanned outwards, he realized that they didn't immediately melt the snowflakes dancing through the air when they came into contact with one another. In fact, not only were they melting slowly, but they were also emanating intense chills in the process, which was causing him to expend more energy on his phoenix flames that he calculated. What's happening? Yan Xiaosh had already channeled more than 60% of his soul power, but his phoenix flames had only managed to extend 5 meters out from him. Furthermore, the more they continued to expand, the more snowflakes they encountered from Hua Yuao's snowy dance of ultimate ice, and the colder the chilly air released by those snowflakes got. Yan Xiaosh quickly realized that, to his surprise, he'd been suppressed, and that Hua Yuao was actually using the quality of his soul power to suppress his own cultivation advantage. How is this possible? Their martial soul fusion should only give them the strength of a newly minted title Douluo. How could his ultimate ice be so strong? Tang Clan doesn't possess any ice-type abilities. If Yan Xiaosh could see Hua Yuao's current state, he would understand why he was at such a disadvantage. The star Anna's mysterious ice brass was swaying gently atop Hua Yuao's shoulder, while 4 other silhouettes floated behind him. All 5 of his spirits were currently aiding him. Of Hua Yuao's 5 great spirits, the Sky Dream Ice Worm possessed both ice-type abilities and spiritual power, while the other 4 all possessed ultimate ice. When Hua Yuao had fused with the Ice Bear King, Little Bai hadn't just become his spirit and soul ring, he'd also improved his ultimate ice's quality once again. According to the Snow Empress words, the lowest temperature that Hua Yuao could reach with his ultimate ice was 220 degrees below zero. This temperature was already equivalent to what the Ice Empress could reach when she was at full strength. The Ice Empress had been ranked 7th among the 10 great savage beasts. Even though she hadn't been equivalent to an ultimate Douluo when she was at full strength, she hadn't been that far off. All 5 of his spirits had appeared simultaneously. Even though they couldn't boost his soul power with their amplifications, they could still boost his element as much as possible. Furthermore, Blizzard was the soul skill that the Ice Bear King had bestowed Hua Yuao with for his 8th soul ring. Blizzard wasn't just a normal soul skill when it was fused into his snowy dance of ultimate ice. It was considered a formidable integrated soul skill that could be further amplified by his spirits. This was why it had managed to accomplish a certain level of suppression against even Yan Xiaosh's rank 97 radiant phoenix. A faint smile gradually appeared on Yan Xiaosh's face as he felt the pressure exuded on him. He nodded lightly and exclaimed, "Good, very good." After all, the more powerful Hua Yuao was, the happier he was. This practice battle had originally been intended to figure out the exact extent of Hua Yuao's strength anyway. After he finished speaking, Yan Xiaosh's expression suddenly became solemn. He placed one hand above the other, with his palms facing each other. The next moment, his entire body became completely golden, just like when he defended himself against Hua Yuao's spiritual shock. What was different this time was that gentle golden hues were emanating from his dantian, and a small yellow phoenix seemed to be frolicking in front of his dantian. Once this little golden phoenix emerged, his phoenix flames, which had been initially suppressed, seemed to almost become material and liquefy as they blazed outwards. This time, any snowflakes that the golden liquid touched were immediately vaporized. The extremely high temperatures brought about by this golden liquid immediately dispelled the low temperatures brought about by Hua Yuao's ultimate ice, as well as immediately beat back his snowy dance of ultimate ice. Receiving such a rude shock, Hua Yuao had no choice but to withdraw his domain. He almost instantly realized that if he were to continue maintaining his snowy dance of ultimate ice, that his soul power would be completely expended in a matter of seconds, and he was expending Haodong power, which didn't solely belong to him. Yan Xiaosh reappeared in front of them, before looking at Hua Yuao and nodding gently as he said, "Little junior brother, your ultimate ice's quality was quite impressive. What did you feel?" Hua Yuao was momentarily surprised, but his expression quickly changed somewhat as he blurted out, "You used a self-invented soul skill to augment your own soul skills and soul power." Yan Xiaosh smiled faintly and said, "Yes, this is a technique that I came up with some years ago and relied on to become dean of the martial soul department. You have to understand this a bit more. Even though soul tools are developing at a quickening pace in today's world, there's still boundless potential in soul masters that's waiting to be discovered." "Yes," Hua Yuao acknowledged respectfully. He knew that Yan Xiaosh was giving him guidance with his status as his elder senior brother. Yan Xiaosh tilted his head and smiled. "You don't have to be dejected. I used my soul core strength when I broke your domain just now. Your ultimate ice martial soul doesn't yet have a soul core, nor is your soul's quality as concentrated as mine. Furthermore, my self-invented soul skill augmented my radiant phoenix's flames and raised my soul skill's quality instantaneously to achieve such an effect. Do you understand when I say it like this?" A thought occurred to Hua Yuao after hearing Yan Xiaosh's words, and he seemed to understand something, yet at the same time wasn't quite able to place what it was despite trying as hard as he could to puzzle it out. Yan Xiaosh smiled. "All right, that's enough for today. We might not learn as much if we get greedy for more. I know that both you and Tang Wutong's strengths haven't been completely unleashed, but I hope that you two will improve even more during the next 3 years. The next time you two challenge me, I won't show any mercy. Thank you for fulfilling our wishes, eldest senior brother." Hua Yuao got down on his knees in front of Yan Xiaosh. Even though Yan Xiaosh hadn't said much to them, what he had said in the battle they had were enough to benefit him greatly. The person who was most capable of guiding and advising Hua Yuao in Shrek Academy wasn't Elder Sun, but rather Yan Xiaosh. The reason for that was because Yan Xiaosh would be considered to be of the same generation as Hua Yuao, since they were both Elder Mu's disciples. However, Yan Xiaosh had become Elder Mu's disciple a lot earlier than Hua Yuao had, so he had a much deeper understanding of Elder Mu's abilities. Thus, Hua Yuao needed some time to digest what he'd just learned from the battle they just fought. Elder Sun opened the protective dome and walked towards Yan Xiaosh with a faint smile on his face. "Why didn't you give those two little fellas a little more pressure?" Yan Xiaosh smiled back and said, "Sometimes, too much pressure isn't a good thing. Yuao doesn't need pressure right now. He's able to sense danger clearly as it is. He must have felt and learned a lot of things from our battle. Furthermore, and to be frank, I'm a little afraid of this kid. He gave me a good one, and I'm still not sure which one of his abilities gave me goosebumps. It gave me a strong sense of danger. Even if I was able to completely suppress him if we continued, I was afraid to be caught off guard, and that I'd end up losing." "Hey!" Elder Sun stared at Yan Xiaosh, his expression changing to one of surprise. "You were afraid that you'd lose?" Yan Xiaosh forced a smile as he said, "Yes, it's not like I can hurt them, after all, and considering the fact that I couldn't unleash any killing moves, I might actually be hurt if those two kids were to fight with their full strength. I don't know what Yuai used on me, but that sense of danger is still around. Even now." Elder Sun chuckled and said, "I felt it too. This kid is really quite different. He's been standing on a whole different level ever since he broke through and obtained his 8th soul ring. What he needs most right now is more time to accumulate his strength. I just hope that he manages to grow up as quickly as possible." Yan Xiaosh continued, "I'm worried that we're being counterproductive by forcing him to grow too quickly. Therefore, I'm not going to give them any more pressure. Yuao has managed to reach an extraordinary standard with his ultimate ice, and that probably has something to do with his spirits. The temperature of his ultimate ice is also the strongest I've ever seen. At the very least, it's never appeared before in the history of the academy. If I hadn't used my primordial phoenix flames, I might not have been able to touch him. I want to see the standard his ultimate ice soul power can reach after he obtains his soul core. From what I can tell, even without using his and Tang Wutong's Haodong power, he should be able to give typical title Douluo a good fight." Elder Sun nodded and said, "He should be able to grow up within 3 years. However, I'm not sure if the continent's 3 native empires will be able to hold on that long." Hua Yuao and Tang Wutong immediately returned the Sea God's Pavilion after they left. Just as Yan Xiaosh had predicted, they both had some revelations from the battle they just fought, and needed to internalize what they'd learned as soon as possible. Furthermore, Hua Yuao couldn't use his 3 ultimate Haodong skills anymore, which had quite an effect on him. He needed to make some adjustments to his fighting style, since he couldn't use them anymore. Fusing self-invented soul skills with those from soul rings was something entirely new to Hua Yuao. It was something that Shrek Academy's curriculum never even touched. Based on the abilities that Yan Xiaosh had just displayed, it was probably a technique that could only be cultivated by a soul Douluo, at the very least. Thus, this was the most suitable time for him to start learning about such a concept. Hua Yuao wasn't the only one who'd had revelations. Tang Wutong was the same. They both went back to Hua Yuao's room and crossed their legs on the beds, placing their palms together. They channeled Haodong power as they cultivated. This was the first time that they cultivated together since their martial soul fusion. Compared to before, their Haodong power was much denser and vaster. Huo Yuao immediately felt his soul power improving, as well as the manifold mysterious ice essence within his body being almost completely assimilated. What Yan Xiaosh hadn't known was that the main reason for his ultimate ice's rapid rate of improvement and its temperature being so low was due to the manifold mysterious ice essence. Huo Yuao hadn't unleashed his full strength during the practice battle, nor had he truly unleashed his spirits, which also needed to be considered as part of his fighting strength. Huo Yuao's spirits were different from those of most soul masters. His spirits' consciousnesses had been stabilized through the manifold mysterious ice essence. Thus they themselves possessed a certain level of strength. Once they were fully unleashed, they would be able to support and complement one another. Plus, with the amount of experience that the Snow Empress and the Ice Empress had, they'd probably have been able to hold out a bit longer against Yan Xiaosh, even though they couldn't possibly have defeated him. Huo Yuao and Tang Wutong placed their palms against each other's, after which their soul power rippled and undulated continuously within their bodies. Huo Yuao's soul power improved conspicuously with every circulation, even though a soul master needed an immense amount of soul power to increase their cultivation rank by even a single rank after they became a soul Douluo. Huo Yuao still felt that he'd be able to reach the threshold of becoming a titled Douluo during the next 3 years with his current cultivation speed. As someone who possessed an ultimate martial soul, once he became a titled Douluo, he'd have the strength to challenge a normal transcendent Douluo by simply relying on his martial soul strength. As time continued to pass, Huo Yuao remained completely immersed in his revelations and realizations, his emotions incessantly rippling as he did so. Tang Wutong is Donga, and she's back by my side. Just that single thought gave Huo Yuao a lot of emotional clarity. Even though he'd lost his 3 ultimate Haodong skills in the process, he didn't regret anything for even a second. What could bring him more joy or pleasant surprise than his lover returning to him? But at the same time, he quickly realized how important emotions were for self-invented soul skills. Emotions were considered to be a part of spiritual power, yet at the same time, they weren't equivalent. They could be considered an inexplicable force with an abstruse origin. Back then, the most important reason behind his 3 ultimate Haodong skills being so powerful was due to them containing his intense emotions. At the same time, the repercussions and residual effects brought about after using them also stemmed from his emotions. Since emotions can increase the power of self-invented soul skills, does that mean that I can fuse my emotions into my other self-invented soul skills now that I've lost my 3 ultimate Haodong skills? The goddess of light was undoubtedly Huo Yuao's fundamental self-invented soul skill. The truth was that he'd adapted his 3 ultimate Haodong skills from it. Thus, now that he couldn't use them anymore, it seemed that he'd have to put more effort back into his goddess of light. The emotions that his 3 ultimate Haodong skills relied on were longing and yearning. Now that Wutong was back by his side, those feelings had to transform, but into what? Love. Yes, love is the answer. This thought had barely surfaced in Huo Yuao's mind when he suddenly felt an intense quiver in his spiritual sea. In the next moment, the love in his heart immediately flooded towards Tang Wutong like a tidal wave. Tang Wutong's beautiful frame trembled a little in response. Her spiritual sea had originally been extremely messy and chaotic, as Wang Dong's memory had only been awakened a short time ago, and she hadn't yet managed to completely integrate the memories of her childhood. She felt her heart and body quiver intensely as she was stimulated by Huo Yuao's intense feelings of love, and a dash of rosiness appeared on her cheeks as her lips gradually tilted into a faint smile. These dense feelings of love surging into her mind were akin to the most potent natural treasures as they nourished her spiritual sea and supported the fusion of her memories. Love was an ocean for eternity. Only love could truly last forever. Whether she was Wang Donga or Tang Wutong didn't matter. Her name was only a label. Tang Wutong had insisted that she was Tang Wutong rather than Wang Donga because her memories hadn't been completely fused yet. In her heart, she'd been a little afraid that her feelings towards Huo Yuao weren't genuine, which had caused her to have a little resistance towards him in her heart ever since recovering her memories. But at this moment, as she was smothered in Huo Yuao's dense feelings, her memories began to fuse at an accelerated rate. Slowly, her entire being's emotions began to change as she was continuously buffeted by his love. Wang Donga's originally deep-seated love for Huo Yuao was died out and took the driver's seat, merging together with love that Huo Yuao was emanating. Their Haodong power quietly sublimated, while their love continued to ripple and undulate away from, and because of that sublimation, they weren't just fusing their martial souls anymore, their emotions and spirits were also fusing. This was the true meaning of coming together to become one. When Huo Yuao felt the reciprocated love coming from Tang Wutong, he was overjoyed. Love was a mutual feeling, thus only with mutual love could it continue to sublimate and evolve. At this moment, the type of love that Tang Wutong and Huo Yuao were feeling was that type of sublimating love. Their overflowing emotions began to encircle their hearts and souls, and faint white halos appeared around their bodies. Gentle undulations could soon be seen as their bodies were cocooned in light. Their soul power, spiritual power, and spirits were being rinsed and doused in their dense feelings of love. Slowly but surely, their soul power was changing, and the golden light from within the trident on Tang Wutong's forehead began to circulate within her body. Strange transformations also began to happen to Huo Yuao's soul power and aura. I love you, Donga. I love you, Wutong. Huo Yuao's voice was filled with love as it resonated within his mind. Suddenly, Huo Yuao felt his spirits be invigorated, and in the next moment felt his spiritual power seem to leave his body. He'd experienced a similar feeling before, but that was when he channeled his spiritual power out of his body. Now that his spiritual power was in the concrete material realm, his spiritual power leaving his body along with his spirit didn't mean anything was wrong. But this time seemed different. Huo Yuao studied himself closely, only to realize to his astonishment that it wasn't his spiritual power that was leaving his body. Instead, it was his own, actual spirit leaving his body. Yes, just his spirit, without any spiritual power accompanying it. Human spirits were extremely weak. Once they left one's body, they would continuously dissipate. The moment that he realized his spirit was leaving his body, he quickly realized that there was also a faint white layer surrounding his spirit that seemed to be protecting it from dissipating. With his spirit currently in midair, Huo Yuao could see Tang Wutong and himself with their palms pressed against each other's, cultivating. Gentle white light surrounded their bodies, and Huo Yuao could still vividly feel their sublimating soul power, spiritual power, and emotions, despite currently looking down at himself. What's happening? Why has my spirit left my body by itself? Huo Yuao attempted to control himself and return to his body, but he realized to his surprise that he couldn't make his spirit move at all. At the next moment, some kind of strange force appeared in the ether that instantly pulled his spirit out of the sea god's pavilion. Once his spirit exited the golden tree, it began to rise into the sky. The sun was radiant outside and shone down upon the entire Shrek Academy, but a shred of panic still appeared in Huo Yuao's mind. This was the first time that he'd come across such a strange situation. He had no idea what was going to happen. His spirit had left his body and was continuously rising through the air. It wasn't a great feeling. Huo Yuao could feel himself getting further and further away from his own body. Even though his senses were still connected, he couldn't control his spirit's movements in the sky at all. Why is this happening? What's happening to me? Huo Yuao couldn't find the answer. Intense fear and panic beginning to permeate his mind. He had been through so much to get Tang Wutong back at his side, yet his spirit had still left his body in such a strange fashion. What exactly is happening? What's happened? No, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave Wutong. I still have to protect and love her. Intense fear and panic caused a wave of acute emotional ripples to spread from his spirit as he tried to struggle out of the restraints binding his movements. Right at that moment, a gentle aura suddenly enveloped his spirit. This aura was extremely strange, as there seemed to be an immense amount of pure emotions undulating within it. After it appeared, Huo Yuao felt an incredibly comfortable feeling course through his spirit, as if he'd been immersed in warm spring water. This nourishing feeling made him so comfortable that he wanted to know. All traces of panic, fear, and negative emotions disappearing without a trace. Instead, small feelings of comfort and trust had appeared. What exactly is happening? Huo Yuao was extremely intelligent. If he couldn't at least make a guess about his situation, then he wouldn't be Huo Yuao. The aura filled with comfort that had nourished his spirit had immediately made him realize that his spirit leaving his body wasn't because of his own cultivation. Rather, some external power had forcibly pulled his spirit from his body. All the negative feelings in his spirit had been washed away. Thus all that was left was complete astonishment. What kind of strength could forcibly pull my spirit out of my body? Huo Yuao's spiritual power had already reached the concrete material realm. Furthermore, he also had Wang Yue's destiny skull and its skill destiny's adjudication, which granted him immunity to 3 spiritual type attacks per day. Back then, the evil eye tyrant king hadn't been able to kill Huo Yuao with its incredibly powerful attack because he'd used destiny's adjudication to escape with his life. However, this force that was currently controlling his spirit had rendered him unable to resist at all. How powerful would his opponent have to be to achieve this? Even though Huo Yuao wasn't sure why this was happening, he could feel that whoever was doing this to him had to be an extremely powerful individual who didn't harbor any ill intentions against him. Else, that person wouldn't have placated his negative emotions. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.